Hello sweet friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ingalls Gunn. I normally post a new video every Friday, and for those of you who are regular viewers, you maybe have noticed that the last couple of weeks I haven't posted a video. And if you missed the announcement on social media, I have been in the process of remodeling my home, and this is one of the projects I've been doing. It was a German schmear treatment to our brick fireplace hearth. And unfortunately, during the remodeling process, I ended up falling off of a ladder and on the way down completely destroyed my laptop. And my laptop contains all of my video editing software. And so it's been a few weeks for me to get back on track. And I am very sad to say that I also had lost some footage of, I think it was 3 projects that I had been working on. And so I will go ahead and share the projects that are completed. I'll incorporate them into new videos. And so one of the projects was this 1940s blouse and skirt. In early February, we had gotten a notice from the weatherman that Texas was going to be receiving several inches of snow, and that's somewhat of a rarity in the area that I live. So I wanted to make some clothing that a woman might have worn in the 1940s in the winter time. So a long sleeve blouse, a wool skirt, and I was able to cobble together a post over on my website of the patterns that I used and some tips that might be helpful to you. So I will link down below to that post if you would like more information on the outfit that I made and am wearing. And it was a outfit that I had in mind for the World War II challenge that is still currently going on. So I'll link to all of that information down below as well. And I have to share a giggle with you guys. In a early February video, I had talked about vintage sweetheart jewelry and shared some examples that I have in my own collection. And one of the things that I mentioned was wire jewelry, and that particular style of jewelry often had the individual's name, or it might say mother or sweetheart. And I said, you know, I wasn't able to find my brooch that had my name, and as an aside sort of said, I bet as soon as I finish filming this video, I'll find it. Well, no truer words were said. So I just wanted to show you this sweet little brooch. It says Laura in gold wire, and soldiers would send those back to their sweethearts. So I thought it was perfect on this 1940s blouse. All right, so let's get back to what this week's video is about. Now, I think I've mentioned before that I belong to the Dallas-Fort Worth Costumers Guild, and then there is also a women's vintage group that is here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I'm also a member of. And sometimes those two groups intersect with events. It's normally from the 1920s on that the Vintage Women's Group plans events for. And so there is an upcoming event at the Dallas Heritage Society, and it is 1920s themed. Now, I had taken a 1-hour dress class. It was probably about 2 years ago, and that was an absolute disaster. One thing about the 1-hour dress is that you do have to take your measurements correctly, and I was working with a partner, and unfortunately they were very new to sewing and didn't understand the measurements. So based on the measurements I had been given, my dress ended up being about 4 sizes too big for me. So unable to somewhat salvage it using 1-hour dress principles, I did remake it into a summer dress that I actually shared this past summer. And so again, I'll link to that dress down below. So, you know, I've never had a successful 1920s dress yet. And here in Texas, we actually have a lot of 1920s themed events. Bonnie and Clyde were actually in my neck of the woods, and so there's a lot of 1920s architecture. And so up until this point, I hadn't really attended any of these events. So I wanted to make not just one dress, but 2 dresses. So in this video, we'll cover the first dress that I made. And you know, in the 1920s, what we now see in our films today that often portray that time period is they take the styles from the late 1920s, and that's when the waistline was really dropped low and had some asymmetrical skirt attachments. The early 20s, you know, the waistline is much higher, and I have actually learned in this process that I prefer early 1920s fashion for my body type. So you'll often see me wearing A-line or gathered skirts because it kind of camouflages that I am a bit wider down below than I am up top. So I thought I would go ahead and start with the harder style for my body type. And it was around, I think, the mid-20s that the waistline really started migrating to the south. And in listening to what some of you had mentioned you'd like me to cover more of, is taking patterns that are readily available through the big 4, and by that I mean Butterick, Simplicity, McCall's, and Vogue, and maybe taking that pattern and tweaking it just a little bit so that it's more historically adequate. And for those of you who are not familiar with that term, if you are historically accurate, that means you have followed the fashions of whatever time period that you are sewing to the letter. Now, it's almost 100% impossible to be completely historically accurate, just because I think for most of us, we're not spinning our wool or weaving our linen. You know, we're purchasing that ready-made, and of course fabrics are not constructed in the same manner that they were centuries and decades ago. But There are many, many wonderful costumers that do beautiful depictions as close to historically accurate as you can get. And then there are others, like myself, that are historically adequate. And why do I say that? Well, this dress is a really good example. So I've mentioned before that I find the vast majority of the fabric and sewing notions that I use at estate sales and thrift shops, and that keeps my costs down, as well as repurposing some great fabrics that are really unique and wonderfully made. And I had found this cherry cotton print at an estate sale about 2 years ago, and I only had 2 yards of it. So that somewhat limited me in what I could make. And the 1 hour dress typically on average takes about 2 yards of fabric. It doesn't require a lot of fabric. So I had pulled this print out, and it's really darling, but again, it's not quite historically accurate. You can see that it was made by a company called The Villager in 1966. So still really charming. While the color was a popular color in the 1920s, the print itself is a little bit too busy for that time period, but I'm opting to use it, and therefore that is why I say that it is historically adequate. Now, some of the other things that I used to create this were some Edwardian lace embellishments that I have. I can never pass by a beautiful eyelet and lace, and this is yummy good in that it's 100% cotton. Many of our eyelet laces that are sold today are made from a polyester blend. So, and as it was, I had just enough for this color, and as you can kind of see, it's not the same eyelet, but it's close enough, I think, that it works, and I had just enough for each sleeve. I actually had to piece it, which I do talk about in the upcoming segment of this video. So let's talk about the pattern. I started out with Simplicity 9088, and this is one that you can currently find at your sewing supply store. And looking at it, it looks very cosplay. And it's been out for a while, and I thought, oh, do I really want to sew that? But in rising to this challenge, I thought, can we take this particular pattern and make it more historically accurate? So first things first, because the event that I'm going to is at the end of March, that's always a gamble in Texas. It might be 90 degrees. There might be snow on the ground. So I wanted to make it out of cotton. So that was the biggest difference, not making it a dressier fabric. This is a style that women would have worn every day, as an everyday house dress. And for a woman of my age bracket, they would have covered their arms, and the style of the day was really about elbow length. So I rummaged around in the patterns that I had, and this is a blouse pattern that I've made many, many times. It is really wonderful. I love it. And you can see that it includes a longer sleeve. And so it's well worn. I actually am gonna make a muslin out of this pattern piece because I do use it so often. So I just sort of Frankensteined the two together. And again, I'll show you in the next segment how I did this, and we will finish up with me modeling the dress. For mock-up round 1, I had cut a size 16, and overall it was just too big, particularly around the neckline. It was almost falling off my shoulders. So I have now cut out a size 14, and hopefully this is going to fit a little bit better. I want to eliminate the center back seam for this dress and just cut it on the fold. So to do that, I need to move the pattern piece over 5/8 of an inch, because that is the seam allowance that you would normally sew. And then I will adjust my cutting of the pattern on the cut edge. So from this angle, you can see that once again at the bottom, I'm eliminating the 5/8 of an inch sewing seam. Now this pattern is cut where it goes in a little bit more at the waist, but as I'm trying to make this a typical 1-hour dress, which is a series of rectangles, I then lay the pattern up at the top, giving it the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance that it needs. And then from my original mock-up, I'll be cutting off about an inch of fabric, which will greatly help with the fit. It really was looking like a potato sack, so the smaller allowance of the overall fabric piece will fit much better. About this dress, once I had it on, is it did somewhat accentuate that I like tacos a little bit. And so since I do have a little bit of fabric left, I'm thinking about just adding a little scarf right here, sort of a flowy scarf to kind of camouflage, if you will. And that is a style that you see in these types of dresses, and it'll be interesting to see how that affects the overall appearance. Now, as to what dress I should wear to the event, after you see next week's video, you can let me know which one I should wear. And thank you so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this, please hit the thumbs up button that's right down below, and in the corner is the subscribe button if you would like to be notified of future videos. Have a great day.
Gigi, come on, everybody out. Let's make a video with Gigi. Let's make a video.
Hey.
Hey, Pony.
Pony.
Come see Gigi.
Come on, Pony.
Pony, come see Gigi.
As I've mentioned before, There's the phone. I thought I turned it off. Yo mama,